This is the Mobile Tech Podcast, brought to you by worldpodcasts.com. Now here's your host, Tech Girl, Miriam Joie.
Brought to you by Mint Mobile. Stay tuned for a special offer at the end of the show. Hi, and welcome to the Mobile Tech Podcast. I'm your host, Miriam Joie, and today is Thursday, May 23rd, 2024, and I'm here in Dubai with Sam Byford. Hi, Sam. How are you?
Hi, I'm good. It's nice to sit down. We've been talking about this for a while. So.
I know. You know what's interesting is I recorded in Sweden last week, and now I'm in Dubai. People are probably wondering, I'm like, yeah, I went home for 36 hours. It's crazy.
You told me your itinerary. It didn't sound...
it was a little rough.
It didn't sound like a lot of fun.
Yeah, no. But look, here's the thing. We're here for Poco. Poco just launched a bunch of new devices. We've got them. I've got one of them at least here, the Poco F6 Pro. And, it's an interesting set of devices. So I wanted to kind of chat with you a little bit about that first. I got my open. I'm going to pull out for a second to see the PDFs and we can go through the specs and stuff. I kind of want your thoughts about kind of a meta conversation about Xiaomi in general, their branding, their model lineup.
Sure, yeah.
And then you're in Asia, you're in Japan. So how do Chinese phones do there? How do you see Xiaomi fit in the whole Chinese phone, constellation, as it were? That's kind of where I want to go with this. Of course, we want to talk about the devices a little bit. And then we got some Microsoft news, in case you haven't noticed. So are you excited about all this?
Very excited.
I think Poco, for me, has always been a little bit of a delight in the Xiaomi family. Redmi seems to be a little kind of we're trying to reach a price point and there's not a lot of passion in that brand, it feels like to me, whereas Poco is kind of trying to be more playful and fun, kind of like Realme, I think, does in the BBK group. And of course, you got Xiaomi, with the big guns, like the 14 Ultra, which is here in my pocket. That thing is just never...
That is my favorite right now, yeah.
And so I want to hear your thoughts, where, how do you think Poco fits into this whole Xiaomi ecosystem? And what do you think of these devices, if you've played with all of them yet?
Yeah, I have. It's interesting because these devices, to a certain extent, they are based on Redmi devices, right? The chassis is very similar to some of them, but a little bit of the specs have been changed around. But the design is a lot more bespoke to the brand, I think. To your point, Redmi is quite... I don't know, Redmi is kind of like the Uniqlo of phones, right? It's like a basics kind of look to the device, and they're hitting a price point. They're competent phones, but they're not very exciting. Whereas I think with Poco, Xiaomi sees the opportunity to sort of remix them a little bit for a kind of maybe a more specific audience, right? So Poco has always been appealing to gamers. They have pretty high performance for the price, and they, as you can see with the F6 Pro, for example, which is getting announced this week, it's the design is pretty cool, I think, and it doesn't feel like you're using a sort of cheap phone trying to hit a price point.
No, and I think this is kind of why I always think of phones as kind of like a triangle of value versus specs versus experience, and you got to hit all three. It's got to have to be an equilateral triangle where if you put a pin in the middle, it stays balanced. So I think for me, what I like about Poco is that they often kind of get close. The experience to me, HyperOS has been generally okay. I still think that BBK groups, other than Vivo, Realme, Oppo, OnePlus is my preferred Chinese phone skin experience. The closest I feel to what I'm comfortable with, which is generally Pixel, Pure, EOS, Android. But HyperOS, I think honestly, there's not a huge difference in that and MIUI to me. The biggest problem is that it's too iPhone-like with the, pull down from the right to get the quick settings, pull down from the left for notifications. You can't dismiss the notification by swiping left. You have to swipe right. It's a bit that part really does irk me. And that's the only reason why I think I would knock a few points off of experience on this Poco phone series.
Yeah, I think also if you compare the HyperOS build to something like the 14 Ultra, you do have quite a bit of bloatware and so on to deal with, right? And that just comes with the price
point. That is
point.
true, even the BBK group.
Of course, yeah.
It's always a nightmare for bloatware, and thankfully most of it is uninstallable.
Yeah, it's fine. It comes with the territory. Yeah, HyperOS, I think it is very iOS-like, of course. And part of that is just sort of the landscape in China, right? I think people bounce between OSs a lot more frequently than we tend to in the West.
I think so, but I'm surprised that, like BBK is doing it, right?
Yeah.
I mean, Vivo is still in a whole different universe.
Well,
it seems.
BBK has learned a lot from OnePlus, right? In terms of how people around the world can kind of get used to sort of these Android skins. And, Color OS used to be a lot different than it is today, right?
Much. So, it's improved drastically.
Yeah.
It feels to me like, you're right, Oxygen OS, even though it's now common code base with, Color OS has kind of dictated the user experience.
Yeah, I
feel like Color OS has met Oxygen and then they've grown together.
Right.
Not like, I think a lot of you are going to be also arguing about this on the show here, because I know there's some purists that lament the days of the old Oxygen OS, and I hear you and I feel you, but I feel that the performance on BBK Group phones right now, in terms of like smoothness, is really solid across the board.
Yeah, I agree.
And I feel that with HyperOS as well. So going back to these Poco phones, so there's 3 devices they announced, okay? One of them is a tablet, the Poco Pad. There is a Poco F6 Pro, which is kind of a clone of the Redmi K70.
K70 Pro, right?
70 Pro, right? I was just going to ask you that because I wasn't sure. I need to check my notes on that. And then there's an F6 Non-Pro, and then there's this pad. So like what I'm very excited about on the F6 Pro is that when I first saw it, I was like, this looks identical to the X6 Pro.
Yeah.
And it does. Like, it's like physically the same shape, size, weight, and a bit heavier actually. And then the camera pod is almost identical. But here's a kicker. This is aluminum on the F6 Pro. It's a metal frame, whereas the X6 Pro, which is a more affordable phone, is as plastic. And
glass back too. Yeah. With a nice kind of like slate finish.
But it's interesting that both have an OIS, large megapixel main sensor. Both have that crappy 2 megapixel macro. Both have a middling.
It's there just so they can have 4 neat circles in the back.
And it's interesting that they both I think have the same 8 megapixel ultra wide too.
Yeah.
But also the display, it's Quad HD. Which
display is really good.
I thought it'd be a 1220p, then in between, but no, they went all out, right? So that was very strange to me. And then Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 on the F6 Pro and 8S Gen 3 on the F6.
This is interesting, isn't it?
So to me, I'm wondering, like, benchmark. I haven't run benchmarks on.
I've run a few.
And is it the same as 8 Gen 2? It should be roughly the same. Right?
I would say they are in the same tier, but like they trade blows, right? As you would say, like they just to explain what they are, the 8 Gen 2 is last year's like flagship phone, right? So like the Xiaomi 13 Ultra had the 8 Gen 2. The 8S Gen 3 is like a cut down version of the 8 Gen.
Yeah, I mean, the audience knows we went through that a few weeks ago. I think what I'm trying to establish is, it seemed to me when Qualcomm announced the 8S Gen 3 that it was kind of like essentially an 8 Gen 2 Plus or 8 Plus Gen 2. You know what I'm saying? That's what it should have been.
They have a similar kind of core arrangement, but it's running newer processors and so on. So what I found is that the F6 Pro is faster, a little bit faster in single core stuff, but on GPU and multi-core, the F6 is a little bit faster.
Wow.
So it's I mean, like, this is not the kind of thing that I would maybe base a buying decision on, because I think it would be different in the game you're running, for example. Like the benchmark is not necessarily going to translate, but it is interesting that just from a product marketing point of view, right, that they have this Pro device and they have different chips, but the Pro chip is not like clearly better.
Yeah. And it's interesting to me because the NPU is going to be better on the 8S Gen 3.
Yes.
Too. So you're future-proofing a little more if you think AI is a thing. But yeah, this is a very puzzling, like I actually thought when the rumors of 8S Gen 3 were happening, that was going to be the F6 Pro. And I figured the F6 would have like, Dimensity 8300 or 9200 or even like an Snapdragon 7 Plus Gen 2 or something.
I guess it's like, if you're buying a device that is called Pro, I guess maybe the thinking is that they don't want it to be cut down in any way, even though it's older.
Yeah, but we've seen Pro ones using the 8 Plus Gen chips before, and nobody's complained. I don't know. I think it's very interesting. Other things to know. So 50 megapixels, so larger sensor than the X6 Pro, which is a 64. But this has got OIS, good thing. I talked about the useless sticker cam 2 megapixel macro already. Battery charging, also good. 5,000 milliamp hour battery with 120 watt charging.
They're losing wireless.
It's actually weird. It's interesting that you say that way, because I would like to say, and I'm a huge wireless charging fan. I want all my phones to have it. But I would like to say that this is actually a return to form for Poco.
Yeah, but they made a big deal of the F5
Last year,
Pro
I
being
know.
the first one with wireless charging. So 1 year later, what are we doing here?
We're going on about this is last year they surprised us by giving us an F5 Pro that had wireless charging. They made a big fuss about it. So fast charging, nice 120 watt. So very similar in charging speed and battery as, like the Xiaomi 14 Ultra that I was holding earlier. Bright screen, 4,000 nits, peak brightness.
It's real bright.
We use it in the desert. So just, I don't have the F6 yet. It's sitting on my desk in San Francisco. Actually, my F6 Pro is also sitting in San Francisco on my desk, but I was able to just borrow one while I was here. And sure enough, it's basically, like super bright in the sunlight. We were in the desert on dunes, here. And
I don't know if this is why the event is here, just so we could test it in the sunlight. But no, I was
good.
Obviously, you're not going to hit that 4,000 in like actual use, but I think the high brightness mode is 1,200 maybe, and
1,200 is really solid.
Tiny bezels as well, by the way.
Yeah, it's a very sexy phone. Actually, it's like at first you're like, oh, it looks like an X6 Pro, and then you look further and you're like, oh, oh, metal frame, oh, bezels, oh, and it just keeps like this is the light part of Poco. It's like every now and then they surprise us in light. The non-delight is the lack of wireless charging to me, right? But honestly, I think design-wise, this is a much more cohesive and good-looking design than the F5 Pro was.
I would agree. Yeah.
That was very boring. Yeah. And then the other thing is, again, this can be a matter of taste, but I don't like this marble finish on the back.
You don't? Oh, I kind of like it.
It reminds me very much of like, it's very Taiwan, like when you go to like the Evergreen Hotel or something and everything is this like weird, it feels like a countertop. So like the OnePlus 12 is like that.
So you're saying marble. I guess do you have the white version of the
I have the white.
Okay, so I have the black one, and to me, like it reads more like slate than marble. And
you can see it here. I don't know if you see it in the camera, folks. So those of you on Patreon watching the video.
It kind of shimmers in the light when you turn it.
Yeah. Do you see that? Like it's like marbly a bit.
Yeah, I guess I prefer.
Yours has a finish like that, but it's much more subtle.
I prefer the black one.
And I do love that the black one has gold accents in the camera. Look. It looks really great.
Yeah.
But yeah, overall, this is a really nice phone. And I think the only thing I would have liked is wireless charging, and remove that 2 megapixel macro. Give us a slightly better ultra wide that's autofocus so you can do macro with it. Something like that.
So the K70 Pro, if I remember rightly, they didn't have the macro. They had a 2x telephoto, right?
They had a better
and a slightly better ultra wide as well.
Yeah.
So
that's the phone.
That's the thing, right? And I think Poco, the focus is they would tell you the focus is not necessarily on like high end.
We don't know pricing though, so that's the big
thing.
Question mark.
What have they achieved by
what was
downgrading
the pricing in the F5 Pro? Do you remember?
I don't remember. I can't keep track of markets.
Neither do I. Plus, it really depends where you are. In India, it's going to be way cheaper than in the West and global. If it comes to global markets, I assume it will. All right, so that's basically it. I think that in terms of storage, you get 12 gigs or 16 gigs of RAM, 256, 512, and 1 terabyte.
It's nice that it starts at 12, 256, right?
Yeah, that's right. 12, 256 is just pretty solid, honestly. Yeah. So let's talk quickly about the F6. I got the specs here as well, just for my education, because honestly, I haven't played with the F6. Have you?
I have, yeah, but not as much as the Pro.
So what do you think?
Well, I used the F6 Pro as like my main phone last week.
Oh, wow.
The F6, I've kind of just been doing like stock comparisons. So yeah, the build is probably the biggest difference, to be honest. We talked about the chips and the performance is maybe a toss-up. The build, it is like very plastic.
It's all plastic.
It's all plastic. It's 30 grams lighter, so that makes a difference. And it's a little bit thinner as well.
I do like the design though.
It's nice, yeah. I mean,
you don't have it in your pocket by any chance?
I do not. Sorry, the camera bumps do not need to be that big. I will say that. like these two giant circles.
Do you think it's cosmetic? Like
of course, it's cosmetic. Yeah, I mean,
some phones it's necessary, right? Because Z depth.
Sure, but I think if you look at the size of these sensors, it's like a 1/1.95, I think, for the main.
Oh, yeah, it's small.
Yeah, it's not. I very much doubt that there is a reason beyond cosmetics for the size. But they do have a cute little ring flash thing next to it.
That's right. And also, they don't seem to have. Do they have a crappy 2 megapixel camera?
No, they don't. They ditched it.
See, you can do it, Poco. Yeah, I think this is cool. Like 5,000 milliamp hour battery. Again, this is 90 watt charges and 120. Still no wireless charging. 50 megapixel. Is it the same camera? No, it's a smaller.
No, it's not. It's a smaller sensor. Yeah.
Yeah, and then 8 megapixel ultra wide. It's probably the same one. Big difference here, though, is the build and materials.
Yep.
And I think overall, you're not getting a much lesser. Of course, you get a 1080p panel now.
No, it's 1222.
Oh, so that's the 1220.
They call it 1.5K, which is
Oh,
not a precise
yeah,
term.
it's interesting. It's not in the specs. It doesn't say anything.
It's very slightly, it's slightly dimmer, but it's still pretty bright.
2400 nits peak is still pretty decent.
Yep, and it's still 120 hertz.
Yeah. So there you go. Base config is 8256 with 12512 as an option, and yeah, it's a lot lighter. Wow, look at that.
Yeah, I mean, it does make a difference when you pick up the two.
Yeah, for sure. Actually, I have the X6 Pro
Oh,
with
okay.
me because
Yeah.
you know when I left, I was like, I got to bring a Poco.
Got to bring a
Pro,
Poco
at least
of some sort.
Thank God they lent me this white F6 Pro, but the X6 Pro I have, like, you can not put them side by side. You notice, like, I'd say it's at least 20 gram difference.
Right.
Probably from, you know, like metal frame,
Yeah.
larger display, the, you know, battery maybe difference. I don't know. It's interesting though. So now the Pad, have they ever done a tablet
This
before?
is their first tablet.
This is their first
Yeah.
tablet? This is arriving apparently in San Francisco anytime now. I've got the specs here. So the gist of it is 12.1 inches is a big tablet, 120 hertz display, probably IPS. Yeah, it's LCD.
Yep.
Snapdragon 7S Gen 2 mobile platform.
So that's a cut down version of last year's mid-range chip.
Yeah, that is interesting. I didn't even know that chip existed. Oh yeah, that's right. They just announced that. 33 watt charging, HyperOS, quad speakers. So the question for this is going to be the pricing. And is there any keyboard accessory?
There is. It, like, not with a trackpad, just a keyboard. There's also a pen.
And do you think we're getting that on our unit? Do they say anything?
I don't know.
Because to me, it's like, I like using tablets just as a Netflix viewing device. If I have a little stand, I can put it on. You know? Like I take a bath, I put it next to me in the bathroom. Nice. But I'd rather have a keyboard and or stand so I can actually be slightly productive with it. So I hope they give us that.
Yeah. The question here, right, is with that chip, how much are you really getting from the productivity side of things? I guess we will see, and hopefully they do send us that. But so did you try the Xiaomi Pad 6S Pro 12 like the long thing?
The last thing they sent me was about, I want to say 2 summers ago. They sent me a Redmi tablet.
Okay.
That was all metal, really thin.
Yeah.
You know, and I've used it for Netflix a lot. The display is really nice and bright, IPS. Sounds great, good speakers. It's like MediaTek. It's not even like a, you know, fancy processor of any kind. It's probably like a $250 tablet.
So I've been using this Xiaomi one that they announced at MWC this year.
And that's the more flagship one, right?
That's basically their first like iPad Pro competitor. Right. It has a keyboard with a trackpad and the stylus and stuff. And the chip is the 8 Gen 2, so same as the F6 Pro. And it's great. Like, it runs really well. And I think what they've done with HyperOS on a tablet is actually like pretty clever. Like the multitasking works pretty well in my experience.
So that's actually maybe a plus for HyperOS because, you know,
yes.
to me, it doesn't really feel that different than
you can do things that you can put your like Xiaomi phone on the side of the screen and it mirrors automatically and stuff. And Poco claims that this tablet does all of that same HyperOS stuff. So I'm interested to see if it works out well from a productivity thing.
Well, I'm glad it comes with a keyboard and pen kind of like, you know, package. Hopefully we get it because that's, to me, it's like, if it's going to be 12 inches, I kind of want to try to use it as a productive device.
Yeah, I guess the other thing is that so the Xiaomi one is 3:2 aspect ratio, which is, I guess, yeah, so that's 12.4 and this is 12.1. So the difference is probably that this is 16:10.
Yeah.
So that's going to make it not as great for productivity as well, but we'll see.
I'm looking at my MacBook Air M2 in front of me right now, and I'm like, that's 13 inch. That's going to be a big tablet.
Yeah. So the Xiaomi one is like very slightly shorter than a big iPad Pro, basically. Okay. Again, because of the aspect ratio.
Right.
So it's about the same width.
Yeah, this Redmi I have is like an 11 inches or 10 point something. It's pretty small-ish.
Yeah.
So this is what we got here at Poco. And sorry we don't have pricing. We're actually recording this the morning of the announcement because of logistics and timing. And so by the time this podcast gets published on Sunday, we'll have more information. I'll put links in the show notes to relevant pricing and data that we have, you know, that we get before then. So just keep an eye on the show notes for more details. But going back to what initially conversation, like I agree with you, like the Poco brand to me, it's more fun, it's more playful. Not only because they also make gaming phones, but also because like the color, this yellow theme you see repeated. I really like their yellow phones or their yellow accented phones. Yeah. It even trickles down to the cheapest, simplest phones they make. In fact, I've always been impressed with the C series, which is like $100 phones, right?
Yeah.
They're like generally running like Unisocs and other weird, not even MediaTek processors.
Yeah.
And they don't suck. Like, they're not what I would recommend and pick, but they're not like frustrating to use, which is really surprising. So it goes from that all the way to what we're talking about today, which is, as far as I'm concerned, affordable flagship territory, right? So kudos to them. So in terms of like, we've talked about the marketing and how, Poco's a little more friendly and maybe youthful, playful. Redmi is really kind of hitting the price point value, right? And so how do you think they should, like, it feels to me like it's hard to market Xiaomi in that place. Like, does Xiaomi even make mid-range phones? We never hear about them.
Yeah, so Xiaomi's main flagship series, like what they used to call the Mi series, the Mi number, whatever. Yeah. So they used to be kind of in the space where Redmi.
They used to have a light, right?
Yeah, and they kind of. I think what's happened is as it became more and more possible for like Redmi level devices to become viable as kind of like flagship-ish in terms of performance, Xiaomi's really had to kind of go to the high end for its, like the real high end for its own phones. And so they killed the Mi branding, right?
That's right.
There's no Mi 14, it's the Xiaomi 14. And those are like, sort of trying to eat Samsung's lunch basically in terms of pricing and specs.
And they always have. I mean, even back in the, I started really getting the devices around the 11 series. And like, I remember the Mi 11, what I still call that, was like really solidly competitive with Samsung.
I think the first one I used was the Mi 8, but back in that time it was they were still like competing very much on price. And I think a lot of people were surprised this year at MWC with the 14 because they announced it coming out at basically this, like, not really undercutting on price, just like playing in terms of like feature to feature, like.
But it's fair. Like,
it is fair. Yeah,
I have the 14 and I have the Ultra.
Yeah,
not the Pro, obviously, because it's not sold.
There isn't one. Yeah.
Technically there is, but it's
not here,
China, right?
Yeah.
But like even the base, that is a nice,
it's a real nice
phone.
Yeah.
Like if I wanted a small phone right now, I would pick that over the S24. No contest. It's a better phone.
Yeah, I agree.
So
I think that's their spot, right? Like now I don't know. I think it's just it's a refocusing of the business and the brand, right? Like because they have. Between Poco and Redmi, they have so much, and
there's so much,
and there's like the CV series and all that as well, and like just there's so much going on in and outside China. They have so many markets to juggle. I think it's cool that they've like basically freed up the flagship Xiaomi phone to like literally be a flagship. Like the name of the company is in this phone. It is just the Xiaomi 14, and it's the best phone they can make at that size, that price, that.
And it's also interesting that if you go to a Mi store or Xiaomi store, I went to the one here in Dubai at the mall yesterday.
Oh, there is one. Oh,
there is. I checked it out because I lost the ring.
Oh, the bezel. Yeah, I've been using that. Oh no,
I've lost two of them now.
Yeah,
they come off after a while, or they detach. You're not noticing. You walk and you lose it. And so I went to see if they had. They said it's only online order. But what's interesting is at the store they don't have any Poco. But they have Redmi. So I think what you're saying is happening. The Xiaomi brand is the high end.
Yeah.
And in another corner of the store, they have the entire line of Redmis. Everything Redmi makes.
It's funny that you mentioned the thing because
I love this watch.
I've been using it as well.
But this bezel coming off twice now, like it's not good.
So
like,
in Japan, where I'm based, Xiaomi does not really have like a high end. You can't really buy a 14 Ultra in Japan. They do have. So one thing about Japan is that it's quite recent for unlocked phones and MVNOs to be a thing. So the carriers have been dominant, like more so than the US for longer than it was in the US. So that's quite a new thing. So you can buy like there's some Redmi phones there's Poco phones in Japan as well, actually. But you can buy on Amazon the bezels for this watch.
US. You can buy the watch.
You can buy the watch.
But you can't buy the accessories. Right?
You can't buy the accessories or the high-end phones, I guess. So it's interesting how they're getting into markets in different ways. Like I think the fitness band is also pretty popular in Japan.
100%. This is a great $150. This is a great, dumb smartwatch.
Awesome battery life.
I love the battery life. It does all the basics I need to do: automatic sleep tracking, all of my metrics for my health and fitness, the little bit of fitness I do, and I don't need maps, and I don't need a voice assistant. I don't need any of that. It looks good. Bezels, so I got two more bezels. So but I didn't go home. I went from Sweden. Well, I did go home, but I didn't go to. I got two homes, and I didn't go to the one that has all my stuff. So I wasn't able to get a bezel. I've been bezelless for a week now. I lost it in a supermarket in Sweden. I remember walking in, and it felt loose, and I was like, oh, let's tighten it. And then I walked out of the supermarket, and I looked at my, I'm like,
the thing is, it's easy to fiddle with, isn't it?
Well, I wasn't. That's the thing. My first one, I was fiddling with all the time. And so I wasn't surprised that I lost it in my sleep in the hotel in New Orleans for a trip I went to. But then this one, I was like, okay, because it came with 2 in the box of the silver ring. So I lost 1 silver ring, put the second one on. I'm like, I'm not touching it. Like, I'm not fiddling with it. And I haven't. And it's still loosened up. And I think that's when when you're sleeping, it rubs against stuff. It gets caught. That's the only thing that I think if you buy this, maybe crazy glue it in place or something. Or maybe use like one of those glues that can be, undone with a solvent, like alcohol or something.
It's interesting that like you bring up about that smartwatch because they also have the Wear OS. Like it's a very similar body.
Yeah, they have a Wear OS.
And it's
Watch 3, was it?
Yeah, man.
Like
that's the S2. And
that's the S3.
So the Watch 2 is
Watch
the
2. That's right.
Yeah, so I've tried both, and the I don't know. I went to Hawaii for a week a couple of weeks ago, and I was like, "What am I going to bring with me?" And I picked that one because I don't know about you. I hate charging smartwatches on when traveling, and so I was just like,
2 weeks easy.
Yeah, like I'll just take this. I'll have a little diver bezel on it, so it feels appropriate, and never worry about battery life. It's good. It does what you need,
and it's a nice OLED display that's bright enough in sunlight, and again, like. It just does the basics, and that's what I need. But I'm going to switch to the OnePlus Watch 2 again after this. Since I'm going to lose bezels, I think I'm done. That's the luxury of having no units. All right, so I agree with you. This is interesting. How do you think Xiaomi fits into the general Chinese ecosystem? Like, I still think they're bigger. If I took, like, my gut tells me Huawei's at the top still in China. And then I think it's Xiaomi, and then it's BBK Group.
Well, yeah, but if you add all of BBK together, it kind of depends by quarter, right? So
yeah, but my point is, I'm adding like I still feel like Xiaomi is more. I think Xiaomi and Oppo are really well recognized brands, but I think the rest of it, like Redmi, Poco, and Realme on the BBK side, and Vivo are probably like way lower in scope. Maybe
I haven't seen sort of analytics for the last quarter or whatever, but
I feel like if you throw the 2 names Xiaomi and Oppo in the air to Chinese people, they're going to pick Xiaomi.
Yeah, I think so.
Right? Like Oppo is huge, but not that huge. And so when I say BBK, I'm kind of saying, I mean, there's Vivo too, but Vivo I think is smaller than in people's mind as Oppo. But I think Huawei still
Huawei is definitely doing well. With the new chips and stuff they're developing, I think that's a definitely new wrinkle to it.
They're talking about 5 nanometers now. Watch out. And I believe it. I cannot wait. Like the schadenfreude I will have when the American government gets freaked out because they have a 5 nanometer chip. You deserve that for banning them.
That will be the one. That will be the one that's actually surprising. Because that means they have like ELV machines.
Yeah, but the thing is, look, all they need is one of the machines from ASMR.
Well, yeah, but how do
and reverse engineer it and rebuild it in house?
Yeah, the
Chinese. That's what they do. They have the machines.
Yeah, but there's a reason that these are like literally the most advanced machines in the world.
I know, but my point is that they will eventually. It will
happen. But the question is the timeline. The question is the timeline.
But I think we underestimate how, like, to them, this is probably as critical as when they decide to go to full EV. Right now, like it's just like they're just going to do it. Because I think this is probably the most critical thing.
I agree with you that they are certainly trying to do that. And I'm sure they have the machine. I'm sure they're working on it like 24/7. I think, and expectations for it is not like in the immediate short term, but we will see. Because, people said that about 7 nanometers too. So
exactly.
Yeah.
And, protectionism is not the solution. Like I understand the national security implications and maybe not having Huawei networking equipment for like base stations and stuff, but consumer products, are you kidding me? People would have figured out by now if that was sending data home secretly. Like the white hat hackers would have figured that out by now.
They would.
There was never any evidence of that.
But then again, at this point, I think that's kind of beside the point when they're talking about banning TikTok, right? Like it's.
I know. There and the tariffs on EVs. Like if you want America to become a backwards country technologically, not letting in Chinese EVs so that we can save climate and anybody can afford an EV, which is what we need right now, is keep at it. Let's go backwards.
I saw one car. I think it was Lindsey Graham or maybe someone else said that they were like, these cars are like iPhones on wheels, and it's like, okay, but there's a lot of phones like what is a OnePlus, like an iPhone on not wheels? You've let these into your country, guy.
I know. I don't even believe you brought that name up. I mean, I'm gonna have to remove that from the podcast. just thought of it. I'm sorry. Hey, let's switch gears and talk about all the Microsoft news this week. I mean, so just to fill you in, folks, you know this if you've been following because it's Sunday now as you're listening. Microsoft had a big event, launched some new Surface products, but most importantly, did a big song and dance about Windows on ARM. It seems like Microsoft finally gets it. 4 years after Apple whipped their butt with the M chips, they're finally realizing, Intel's maybe a dead end. We need to move, with something else. And I'm sure they're going to continue Intel. Of course, that's a long-term partnership. And Intel's working hard to kind of be competitive. So, I mean, fine. But look, I'm a Mac user primarily because I come from Unix, right? Like I was a Unix user before Linux existed. And then I went to Linux and then, Mac OS because it's closest to, like I used Windows extensively. I was a video game developer. We did everything in Windows. Like Windows developer tools like Microsoft, Visual Studio and stuff are like the best in my opinion, no doubt. But Windows, it drives me nuts. And I'm not saying I can't use it, and I do, and I have Windows machines at home. But it's not my choice, number one, because I like to just have a shell anytime I want, type GCC and compile code. You know what I'm saying? Like to me, that's kind of like what a desktop.
I actually
OS
do not know what you're saying, but yeah.
But it's just having that core essentials that, anyway, I'm old school that way. My age shows. But here's the thing, ARM, ever since I understood, because I'm an engineer, I ever so understood RISC versus CISC. I knew that ARM would rule over the world in the future. Like back in the 90s when, we saw the Psion organizer, the first ARM-based computing devices, pocketable. They were pocketable and ran on a AA battery because they were ARM-based. Nothing's changed. Like power efficiency and performance has been ARM's like MO since day one. And Intel hasn't, x86 hasn't. x86 has been about like super heavy power, super heavy performance. And so they're going down, which is much harder than ARM that's going up and scaling up to servers and scaling up to flagship laptops and stuff like we're seeing Apple do with their ARM chips, right? So to me, it was inevitable we'd get ARM. And I met you at Computex when we were seeing the Windows RT and, and then I went back to Computex when there was the first Snapdragon compute chips. Like, the first one was the 850, and so then the Microsoft Surface, whatever. X Pro. I have one of those. And personally, I was perfectly happy with the performance because all I need is good web browsing and, but at least with the M chips, you can add video, you can do Lightroom, all that stuff. That wasn't possible until the Snapdragon X series chips. So, this is the big deal here is Microsoft is finally saying we're taking ARM seriously because I think Qualcomm has delivered a chip that is competitive with Apple's. And that's good because kudos to Qualcomm for doing that. I hope MediaTek jumps into it. I hope we see more competition. God forbid, please, Samsung, do not do an Exynos.
Well, no, there's reports of NVIDIA and even AMD. Like,
I know. I mean, look, the reality is it's happening. And this is, to me, there was a lot of rah marketing and dog and pony show around it. And so if you read through all that BS, I feel like my interpretation is, yes, it was hyperbole, but to some extent, but also Microsoft is serious.
Yeah, I think I haven't
finally
used these machines. We'll have to wait for reviews, but it does appear that like they've done it, right? Like they've kind of made competitive machines. And I don't really, you said it was like they finally realized it. I wouldn't necessarily characterize it like that because like you said, with Windows RT and stuff, this is something they've been trying to do for like way over a decade. I think ever since.
But they weren't serious.
Well, but they weren't serious. But you've got to think like, why do people use Windows, right? It's about compatibility fundamentally, right? Whether you're developing video games, whether you're playing video games, whether you're like an office manager, like managing like 5,000 Dell machines because of your like crappy enterprise, whatever you need to run. Like that is like why almost everyone uses Windows. Of course, some people prefer the UI and so on, and they'll buy it on a consumer level for that. But overwhelmingly, the reason is compatibility. And like for Apple to make the shift to ARM, having laid the groundwork for years, killing 32-bit apps, that kind of thing, like moving to an app store model, like that kind of thing, it was just easier for Apple to do it. And of course, also, it was easier because they had an incredible in-house silicon team.
And they had the experience of switching from PowerPC to Intel,
also very
doing
true.
Emulation back then. Now they're able to do emulation again in a good way.
And part of that is also having a very active developer community, which will update and make sure the new machines work. So Microsoft has not had all those pieces in place, right? I think what it has needed is, first of all, the hardware, which, Qualcomm acquired Nuvia, which was founded by ex-Apple guys, like people behind the birth of Apple Silicon. So now Qualcomm has like legit CPU cores. I guess we will see how the sort of translation emulation thing works out, but it sounds like the horsepower is there.
It sounds like they have that figured out, which comes hand in hand with the transition to ARM.
Yep.
Like you cannot have a bad translation layer. So that's going to be very critical.
Yeah.
Because I think native apps, I'm not worried about. But there's that weird, awkward transition that first year.
Yeah.
And Apple, it goes very quickly because the developers switch over quickly and they make it easy because Xcode is all fully integrated. But I think it's going to be interesting because also Microsoft has great developer tools. So hopefully you just flip the switch and it just works.
And I think another thing that you were pointing out is the marketing of it. And this is, like, to be clear, they would have had to do this regardless of this aspect. But the way that they can integrate like the MPU onto the chip and make this a part of like, AI computers, right? Yeah. Like, personally, I would have just liked a good ARM-based Windows laptop 3 years ago, but I think right now, like they're going to be able to sell a lot of these things because they do have, features that I think actually are going to sound quite mainstream and compelling to people, right? Like I think the recall thing is interesting.
Yeah.
Where it basically kind of memorizes what you're doing.
Also scary.
Scary, but I mean, computers track you in all sorts of ways, right? I think, it's these are encrypted like snapshots on your like they have your browser history. Like, come on, I think it'll be all right. But also things like AI powered like drawing tools, that sort of thing. I think.
So here are the 6. I'm going to rapid fire them. The 6 big announcements. This thanks to The Verge for summarizing this. Emma for the win. We've got Copilot Plus PCs. It sounds like
that's the
so
branding.
Far they are all Snapdragon X series PCs. So Copilot Plus, the whole idea is that you get some on-device AI functionality for Copilot.
I think one interesting thing about that is that the MacBook Air would not qualify as one of these based on pure specs.
Correct.
So the baseline for these computers is like, it's high.
Yeah. It's something like 40 tops.
It's 40 tops,
yeah. And we still don't know if that's what kind of tops that is.
We do not. It's not apples to apples.
It's probably 8-bit is what I'm thinking. Okay. Then we got the recall feature that you mentioned.
Yep.
It keeps tabs on everything you do on your PC, so you can kind of recall anything you've done in the past. If you've forgotten, like what document you looked at yesterday at 3:00, you can figure that out. That I would love to see that on Apple. Essentially, since they have Time Machine already and everything.
There is an app on the Mac called Rewind, which basically does the same thing. It's been out for a couple of years, I think.
Wow.
And some people swear by it. I think this is the kind of thing where having low level access, at the system level is.
You think Apple's going to buy them?
Well, maybe.
Because Siri.
yeah. That's actually very possible.
Copilot integrations with Windows 11. So I guess Copilot has more visibility and control inside Windows 11.
Yep.
So you can do things like change settings and whatever else by talk to Copilot. And then we got some Surface Pros, Surface devices. So we got laptops and tablets, 2-in-1s. Let's see. So we've got a bunch of ones with X Elite and X Plus chips. OLED display as an option.
Nice.
13-inch Surface Pro starts at $999. And then we got the laptops, which Microsoft claims are faster than MacBook Air. And then also X Elite and X Plus chips, up to 22 hours of video playback locally. 13, 8, and 15-inch displays starting at $999. And we get lots of colors for those: blue, beige, black, and platinum. That's just a quick look at what's there. I would suggest you go drilling by digging around The Verge, since they have all that stuff. But honestly, I've always liked the Surface products, the design, the industrial design, and it just warms my heart to think they're going to be powered by ARM chips. Oh, so good. Because the battery life has always been the thing for me. Like, honestly, fanless is good, but I can live without that. It's the battery. I'm so used to it now after all the M series.
I mean, we've had Surfaces before, and the battery has not been particularly great on them. So we will have to wait and see.
So you were just talking about, the other big important part of this is we need native apps. Ultimately, emulation's great.
Right.
Maybe they can do it right. I believe their emulation layer is called Prism.
Something like that.
Anyway, Adobe, DaVinci Resolve, CapCut, and more are coming to Copilot Plus PCs. So it's interesting that they're marketing them with Copilot Plus branding as implying ARM PCs. Like, they're not saying Windows on ARM. It's like the marketing is very Copilot Plus. Does that mean that Intel PCs will not be Copilot Plus?
I was thinking about this because
until they reach that 40 tops?
You've got to think that there's... So I don't think Qualcomm is ready to make that kind of like high-end, MacBook Pro level chip right now, right? That'll take some time to scale up. But like, is Microsoft just punting on things like laptops with NVIDIA GPUs, for example, that would theoretically have, higher AI performance?
Yeah.
So yeah, I think I did not think like x86 PCs are going to like die overnight, right? I think we're going to have this runway where some of these features, I mean, there's got to be some way of running them, right? Like I think,
yeah,
but maybe not. Maybe this is just a branding thing.
The other thing is there's a bunch of PCs from other manufacturers, and this is big. I'm just getting a rapid fire through these. Like, there's a lot. I'm going to try to get my hands on at least one of them since I'm starting to write for Forbes Vetted, which does reviews, as you know, with they're kind of an affiliate-oriented site. Their business model is affiliate links, but they do reviews. So they hired me to do that.
Cool.
I'm seeing some laptops. So we've got, this is from our friends at XDA. Hi, Rich. Surface Pro 11 and Laptop 7. Those are the ones we just talked about. Then we've got Dell XPS 13, which makes sense. That's kind of their light and thin line. So yeah, it looks identical. Just, there it is. $1,500 it looks like is starting price. There's an Inspiron 14 Plus as well, which, comes with X Elite and X Plus processors. HP has a few here as well. OmniBook X and EliteBook Ultra. So that's interesting. What's cool about this link, I'm going to put in the show note for XD, is that everything is affiliates, so go support them. But more importantly, if you want to buy an X series Snapdragon ARM-based PC running Windows, they're all available for pre-order, it looks like. So that's kind of cool.
This is a lot more support than Microsoft ever had for like...
Yeah, this is the first time I've seen everyone on board here.
Yeah.
Wow. Very impressive. So the XPS 13 is a little pricey at $1,500. So far, that's the most expensive one, but it is a very nice laptop in Intel form. So it's going to be pretty nice. All right, Lenovo, of course, that would be my pick personally. I'm a big fan. $1,290 for the Yoga Slim 7X. So $1,200 at Best Buy. Then there's a ThinkPad T14S Gen 6. Oof, $2,700. I bet you that, that's really light and thin. Yeah, so you can go high end if you want, which is really nice. Look, I'm a big fan of Lenovo ever since the Yoga Book 9i, the dual display.
Oh, yeah.
I want that with the X Elite in it so bad. That thing was good with an Intel chip. I can only imagine how good it's going to be. The only thing that was a bit of a drawback is that OLED calibration on that thing was so off that I couldn't edit photos on it.
Oh.
Like I was going to correct them to look, and then I would look on my Mac and they'd be like, and it wasn't a color profile thing. It was just like, the OLED is like super like...
There's no way to like fix that, calibrate it?
I don't know. I haven't tried. It's too much work. It should come out of the box like my Mac. It just works.
I do agree with that.
Samsung Galaxy Book 4 Edge, $1,350. Asus has the VivoBook S15, and that's priced at $1,300. And this is just the beginning. I think Acer has announced something as well since then. Yeah, it's all coming.
I would have thought like these would normally come out all at Computex, right? I guess probably they'll save their like new Intel things for that show. But
so it's interesting.
This has to be the list right now. It's a long list.
This is interesting you bring that up because I would have liked to go to Computex this year. So it wouldn't be my first time back since COVID, but I couldn't find a sponsor to fly me out there and put me up. But then I talked to Rich Wood at XDA and he said, everything's going to be announced before Computex.
Yeah.
It might not be worth going. And I was like, I would still go because it's Taipei. But at the same time, I'm like, I feel better now because I think we have all the...
Well, I bet there's going to be a lot of like the usual, 17 Asus Intel laptops, right? But like, who cares at this point? Like, I think we know where the action is for like this sort of device right now.
I know, it's interesting. So, oh yeah, we talked about Acer, Swift 14.
Yeah, those will be they'll be gaming products and stuff, I guess. But
maybe. I mean, look, I think it's going to revolutionize the fanless, light and thin, like MacBook Air kind of equivalent. Beyond that too, with the 2-in-1s, tablet type device like Surface. This is where I love the Windows world. It's like Android, having folding phones, the proliferation of form factors and ideas like that Yoga Book 9i. That's why I'm excited about PCs. But I needed ARM and I needed an OS that is a little. And now that Windows has added a lot of the development tool and the Unix compatibility in Windows now, so that's less of an issue than it was years ago for me. But I think this is very, very good news. Overall, I'm very happy about this. I feel it was a bit hyped though. Like Qualcomm hyped it real hard back in Hawaii at their developer tech summit thing that I went to. And then they calmed down about it. And they've been surprisingly quiet actually now, giving the limelight to the PC makers and to Microsoft on this. But I think also Microsoft is possibly being a little too hypey because of the AI stuff, right?
It's an angle that sells, I think. Like everyone's wondering what Apple's going to say about AI at WWDC.
Well, that's going to be interesting.
It is, because I mean there are things that there are very clear features that Apple can be seen as being behind on, right? And things like I don't know, like they show Lightroom, for example, just added like erase, like the pixel style magic eraser kind of thing. And there's things like that, like where that is the sort of thing Apple should be doing, I think.
I agree.
And they have just not at all had any sort of level of generative AI. Like obviously they do machine learning behind the scenes, but they don't have this like consumer focused messaging right now. And so I think from that point of view, like when Apple is kind of on the back foot, right? I think it makes sense for Microsoft to have a core message like, look, we are at the forefront of this.
No, I agree. I think I would have liked it to be a little less hypey, but I do think that it's good to raise awareness.
Yeah.
Because I think the end consumer doesn't necessarily understand yet how much of a difference ARM makes.
No.
And I hate to say this because look, Intel, you could make ARM chips, okay? Like you used to. Xscale, anyone? Like the fact that when they abandoned Xscale, like wasn't that long ago, like 15 years ago?
Yeah.
I shook my head. I'm like, they're going the wrong direction. This is not the way to go. Especially when they were hyping the Atom for mobile. Remember that?
Oh God, yeah.
You were there for that.
I was.
I was like, are you nuts? This is not how you do this. And it's like, don't get me wrong. There's nothing wrong with x86 like, per se. It's just like it's not where we're going. They can't evolve it that way.
The problem is though, like they kind of made the right call at that time, because those Atom low-powered core machines, they were the ones that ended up in Windows tablets for like the last 15 years.
Yeah.
Because
my Tesla Model 3 has an Atom chip on
brilliant.
The display right now.
But that's because Microsoft couldn't get it together on the software side of things for Windows on ARM. So like I can see why Intel made that bet, because it made sense. But like obviously now they are in like maybe bigger trouble than could have been avoided.
They switched to NVIDIA on the Teslas after that. But that's the thing about Teslas. They all look the same, but inside the hardware gets updated all the time with little. So you really have to pay attention.
I did not know there was an Atom generation.
Yeah, the original, basically the original infotainment computer was Atom powered. Anyway, so that's it for the news in terms of like the big Microsoft announcement, the big Poco news. We got a few more little things here to talk about, which I think are pretty cool. We talked about the Pixel 8a last week on the show, but I know that you reviewed it. Yep. You have on your newsletter, you have a link on the web on your Substack. So I want to point people that direction because it's a great review, and you're a Pixel user like me, and you're in Japan where the Pixel is huge.
Yeah.
So it's going to be a very interesting perspective to read that review, folks. So go for it and check it out. Any quick words on the Pixel 8? What are your thoughts? Because for me, the big challenge here is that, it goes on sale all the time.
Yeah.
Both the 8 and the 8A.
That's it, right?
And it's like, how do you pick the right one at the right time?
I think it's like, if you need a phone, just get whichever one makes sense at the time, because they are very similar. Unless, things like a glass back or whatever are like deal breakers to you. The one thing I will say about the 8A is I haven't seen a lot of reviews point this out, but the screen is like noticeably lower quality than
than the 8?
Yeah, just viewing angles.
What about the 7A? Is it?
It's kind of like the 7A.
Okay.
And the 7 itself also had similar problems with viewing angles. Like you can really see it shimmer like just a couple of degrees.
You see it in this photo in your review, actually.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, I'm kind of picky about this sort of thing, but that would be enough to make me like not want to use it.
Yeah.
But otherwise, though, like if like for the price, I mean, the cameras are great. You obviously get like best in class software. The performance is, I mean, the Tensor G3 is what it is, but I think
it's fine.
You can't complain at that price point for that kind of performance, right? So
I still have issues with the bezels. The
bezels are, it kind of reminds me of the the iPhone 11 or the 10R when they did those LCD ones.
That's the problem.
It's not even, but it's only at the bottom where it's not, and it kind of has that like chunky. I don't know. I don't hate it.
Well, mine again is sitting on my desk. I just got it 2 hours after leaving Sweden, so in San Francisco. And I'm gonna get my Poco packages and my Pixel 8a. So I'll let you know once I actually hold it and use it for a few days whether the bezel. Right now, every time I see a photo, like the 7a was fine for me somehow, but I think because they rounded the corners now, it just seems so bezel-tastic.
Yeah. Well, the 7 was very like it was flat and like pointy. Well, one thing I will say about the A series is I have not sold personally, but sold a lot of people on, like especially journalists, on just picking up an A series, even if they don't use Android, just for things like the Recorder app and that kind of thing, right? Yeah. Like it's the best dictaphone you can buy in the world.
It is,
and it has
one of the best cameras.
Yep, and you get a camera with it. So just as a thing to have, I think everyone should have a Pixel for some reason.
That's why we journalists like it. All right, so yeah, check out Sam's excellent review of the 8A. I'll put the link in the show notes. Then, quick couple of news items. There was a lot I could pick. I always go to GSM Arena for my weekly dose of news. I look through everything they publish. I kind of pick and choose stuff.
Where would we be without GSM Arena?
Yeah, I know, right? The database of all things. Realme's GT6T is interesting insofar that it's a brand new phone in the GT line. It's not the flagship that's coming. One is coming my way. I don't know anything. I don't even know dates. I'm just letting you know that it's coming because they're sending me one. I think there's an event in Europe somewhere soon with Realme.
Kind of same. It looks like the Poco F6.
Yeah. Well, this thing, so this GT6T is kind of like a downgrade. It's like similar to the Neo 6 SE that's available, I think, in China. And the Snapdragon 7 Plus Gen 3. 12 gigs of RAM and 512 gigs of storage. So really pretty high. And here's the other thing. Look, it's a 1264 pixel display, AMOLED, of course, LTPO, 6,000 nits peak.
Wow. That's
brighter than anything we've ever seen.
That's, I think the highest I can think of is the X7 Ultra, which is, like
45, 46. So that's impressive. It's got a 120 watt charging Super VOOC, of course, with a 5,500 milliamp hour battery, which is also really impressive. And charging is in the box, of course. But here's the thing. Very good, BBK Group. Very good, Realme. No sticker cam. You would think this phone is right for a 2 megapixel BS cam.
What does it have?
50 megapixel Sony Litia 600.
Okay.
Nice. LIT 600. 1.9 f-stop. But it's got OIS and it's got a 8 megapixel ultra wide. Nothing else.
This is kind of like the F6 territory.
Yeah, but my point is, it's like they're learning.
Yeah.
It's good looking.
We should support phones without macro cameras in general. I think this is.
I want to see macro photography. Just use it. I want a telephoto. Give me a telephoto macro that does both.
This is what I like. Well, this is what I like about the Xiaomi ones, right? The floating lens where you can kind of like.
Yeah, exactly. Prices on this are A128 costs $370 US, 30,999 Indian rupees. You can get the 8256, a little more storage for 400, and then you can get a 12256 for 430 and a 12512 for 480. They're all below $500 US, and and there's some there's some discounts going on at launch, so you can get a decent price. This is a good looking phone too. So look, I love Realme because I don't know. It's the same ColorOS equivalent UI. It's called Realme UI, but it's really the same as ColorOS and OnePlus Oxygen. And some of their phones are really great.
I used to cover Realme a lot at The Verge. I haven't used one of their phones in a minute, actually.
They're really nice. You should ping them because I'm sure they'll let you play with them.
I think my contact left. So
well, I can connect you with someone.
Cool.
So that's it. Oh no, there's one more thing. Oh, one more thing that's exciting. Sam, you're gonna be excited about this because you live in the land of Sony.
Oh,
So last week we talked about the Xperia 1 Mark VI that's coming out. I might be getting a device, so stay tuned. It's not coming to the US. This is the big disappointment for us because we've always had a bit of a niche market in the US for this phone. Very niche, as you can imagine. But they've given up on us. So
they literally did, right? They announced a couple of years ago. I think it's only the Middle East, Japan, and maybe like the UK.
I might be getting UK model.
Okay, yeah.
But here's the rumor. Remember the Sony Xperia Pro-I back, like, when was that? Like a couple of years back? The one with the big 1-inch sensor that was actually ended up being cropped?
Yeah.
Well, they're making an Xperia Pro-C.
Okay.
What's interesting, this is all we know right now.
The C for crop?
Maybe, hopefully not. I think it's for compact.
Okay.
Because this is a 6-inch screen versus 6.5
nice.
On the big boy, the one we, just got. And this is what the camera module looks like. 1-inch sensor here for the people on Patreon. I'm putting it up in front of the camera for you. It looks like it's not cropped. F of 1.8, 50 megapixel, 1-inch sensor, and it's OIS, of course. But here's what's interesting. It supports 12-bit RAW and 14-bit DCG RAW formats. It's got two 12-megapixel cameras to complement it. And what's weird about that is none of them are like periscope or variable zoom like they're doing on other phones, but this has an f/2.0 aperture on one of those 12 megapixels. So is that an ultra-wide? Is that a tele? Is that a portrait lens? That's a good f-stop for a non-main lens.
Yeah.
So stay tuned. We don't know anything else. 45-watt charging, 5,000 milliamp hour battery.
I wonder about, because you say I live in the land of Sony. I don't think I really live in the land of Sony phones. Like I don't see see a lot of people use, but I do see a lot of people using iPhone minis, and small phones remain really popular in Japan. So maybe this will be something.
So I picked this out of the massive amounts of GSM Arena rumors and leaks simply because I secretly want to see a compact phone with a 1-inch sensor. I mean, 6 inches, arguably not that compact. But
it's a little sad that the Xiaomi 14 cut down the sensor size, right? Because there's no Western Pro model, like you said. Like it's a really nice small build, but the 13 Pro last year did have the 1-inch sensor. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe the 15 is what we'll have to wait for.
Wait, did the base 13? They did not.
The base 13 did not. No. So 1-to-1, it hasn't shrunk it down. But in terms of the non-ultra offering for outside of China,
I wish that we would get a small phone with a 1-inch sensor, and this might be it. And knowing Sony's history of making really good compact phones, my hopes are very high that this is going to happen. And again, we're talking unicorn here because they're going to sell 10 of them. And this is what I love about Sony. Like I want to be very clear. Look, we've lost HTC for all practical purposes. They still make some generic ODM phones in Taiwan. We've lost LG. God forbid. LG was so out there. I love them so much.
Pulling out.
I don't want to lose Sony. Even if they just make niche, weird phones from time to time, please continue doing your weird stuff, Sony. Subsidize with TVs. I don't care what you have to do. Keep making phones.
Give them away with TVs. That's probably the only.
There you go. What are your thoughts on Sony Xperia? Like the fact that they still make phones. How do you think they can maintain that? Do you think it's just like a Japanese cultural thing that we need to make a phone because we are Sony?
I think that is actually part of it. And they've even said that in earnings briefings and stuff.
Okay.
And part of it has been a Halo thing because, they work on Sony's history. They have historically been very fragmented, right? And, with the Bravia division working away from PlayStation, working away from music and so on. I think there was a point in time when Sony thought that the smartphone would be a way to unify the company because obviously from a technological perspective, it brings in everything.
Yeah.
Didn't really work. Because software has never been Sony's strong point. They've never been able to.
I think there's also, a lot of competition within Sony, right? Alpha doesn't want to give away their stuff. Bravia doesn't either. They're very, kind of siloed.
They don't, but they have also, they've certainly from a marketing point of view used things like that. I remember 10 years ago, you'd have Sony phones with G lenses and that kind of thing.
Well, the Cybershot.
Yep.
Come on. Remember Sony Ericsson?
Yep.
Oh, Sony Ericsson.
But I think the thing is, the thing that makes Sony's mirrorless cameras good like that doesn't really translate to making a phone camera good. So
I agree.
Like the hardware is often cool, right? Like the Mark IV with the telezoom, like that's really cool. And I would love to see that on a phone from a company that knows how to tune smartphone photos.
And this brings up a last thing I think we should just quickly touch on. And it's like this whole dichotomy there is between the pixel experience, where it's HDR, but you get that contrasty vibe, but you still never get blown highlights. Everything is balanced. And I think Pixel's really the king of that. Apple doesn't quite do it as well. Samsung doesn't quite do it as well. And Pixel's the only one that brings that Apple consistency from shot to shot as well.
Yeah.
But then you have that, like I'm using the 14 Ultra a lot right now, and I love what I'm getting out of it.
Like authentic mode,
right? Half the time, yes, exactly. Yeah. But half the time I'm like, oh, too contrasty, too blown on the highlights. And I think it's a decision they made on purpose because they want it to be more like a real camera.
Yes.
I talked to Mark Linsengren at breakfast this morning. He's on the trip with us. And, he's very much I'm on the camera camp. I don't want HDR in my camera.
Yep.
I want those blown highlights. And I'm like, no, dude, I want the best of both worlds. I want that contrasty vibe that you get from like a Fujifilm, a chrome, like, what's it called, Ektachrome type, like slide film, but I also don't want the blown highlights. I want everything.
Yeah, but if you don't have the blown highlights, then you don't have everything, right? Like, that's what makes the contrast. Like, to me, what I love about, especially the Leica Authentic mode on the 14 Ultra and the 13 Ultra too, actually, is like the JPEGs look like what I used to spend a long time editing RAW photos to look like,
no,
right?
I agree.
And back then, like I'm talking about cameras with no HDR capabilities whatsoever. You're going to get blown highlights. Shadows are going to be shadowy. And I get that you don't always want it. Like, I think
they should have a slider. You know how they have a slider for exposure?
Yeah.
EV? Why don't we get an HDR, like computational photography slider?
I like that
we can slide it after the fact.
I like that it's opinionated. I like that it has its own look. And one thing I thought was interesting is the Oppo Find X7 Ultra this year, right? So like the way they handle it, I think is really fascinating because the default, like just camera mode before you swipe over to anything else, that looks like phone photos, right?
Correct.
It's very like, it is contrasty, it preserves highlights, but the Pro mode has totally different color science.
Completely different.
So like that, it's like having two cameras in one basically, because it has that Hasselblad tuning, and you can edit it a little bit like further to like tweak your look if you think.
Yeah, the master mode.
Yeah, the master mode, that's what they call it. Right? That's right. And I don't know, like I kind of like just the camera being what it is, and like every time I open especially with the photography kit, right, on the 14 Ultra, I press the button to like open the camera app. I know what I'm going to get color-wise, but I think that for most people, probably Oppo's approach is better.
That's what I'm saying. Like, I think Oppo's approach is really smart there, right? Because Xiaomi still in normal mode still is very kind of camera-ish.
Yeah,
and I want to have a sure-proof photo mode, right?
They had the Leica Authentic mode and the Leica Vibrant mode, and so that's a shortcut on the screen, right?
And vibrant more.
It's not as like colorful, like HDR-y as Oppo's, but it's more smartphone.
Okay. Yeah. I haven't tried it because it doesn't look right contrasty. Right?
But that's the thing, right? And it like say the Authentic mode has the vignetting as well. I don't know.
I took the Oppo to Antarctica. My spouse and I went on a trip, so my review is coming out very soon on Elena's Geekspin.
Cool.
My camera review of the Oppo Find X7 Ultra as experienced in Antarctica.
That's a challenging situation. A lot of white balance issues, I can imagine.
Listen, we should wrap up. Sam, tell people where they can find you on the internet. Please tell them about your newsletter and all your social media handles and everything. And guys, like Sam, newsletter, do it.
Yeah, my newsletter is called Multicore. You can find it at www.multicore.blog. It's hosted on Substack. My handle on most things is 345 triangle, numbers 345 triangle. Yeah, I've been around for ages and seen Miriam a lot. We just saw each other at Barcelona. It's great to finally do this.
I'm so glad. We'll get you on at some point again in the future. Folks, follow Sam.
Yeah, come to Japan.
Thanks. You know where to find me on the internet. I'm at Tankgirl. That's TNKGRL pretty much everywhere. That's my handle. It's like Tankgirl the comic book. Just drop all the vowels. You can find me on Twitter. You can find me on Threads. You can find me on Instagram, Blue Sky. Check out my content there. There's also the podcast, of course. mobiletechpodcast.com is URL. We're on all the podcasting platforms. So please add the podcast, subscribe, tell your friends. And, if your app lets you review or rate the show, please consider doing that. There's a YouTube channel, youtube.com/mobiletechpodcast with some videos on there monthly or so. Check it out. You know how YouTube works. Like, subscribe, tell your friends, click the bell, all that stuff. And then Also, Patreon. I mentioned it a few times here for those of you listening. You can get a video version of this podcast, see us hold phones, talk in person, see our faces a day in advance, usually from the Sunday release of the audio version that is free. So consider helping me out. Consider joining the Patreon. Patreon.com/TNKGRL. That's patreon.com/TNKGRL. I'd appreciate your support. If you want to help me out without using Patreon, there's a link in the show notes to a PayPal button. You can donate some money if you'd like. I'd appreciate your help. And finally, I want to thank our sponsor, Mint Mobile. You know I review a lot of phones, so I'm constantly juggling multiple devices. While that's fun, it also means I'm spending a lot of money for wireless service on multiple SIMs. Thankfully, there's Mint Mobile, and that's who I'm teaming up with for today's podcast. If you want to save money on your wireless service, switch to Mint Mobile. You've probably seen the Mint Mobile ads featuring Ryan Reynolds, but let me quickly tell you how fantastic their service is, especially for tech-savvy early adopters like us. Mint Mobile offers premium wireless for as low as $15 a month, and you don't have to sacrifice any coverage, speed, or data. They're built on the nation's largest 5G network. They keep costs low because they sell direct to you online. They cut out the retail stores and salespeople. Why should you pay more than you have to for access to the same network? In my experience testing phones, Mint Mobile delivers the same data speeds and call quality as the big three for a fraction of the cost. Switching to Mint is super easy. Thanks to their eSIMs, you can sign up and activate immediately right on your phone from the comfort of your home. No more standing around waiting in line at a big wireless store. You can keep your current devices and phone number and easily switch services. And if your phone isn't eSIM compatible, Mint will ship you a new SIM card free of charge. The whole process only takes 15 minutes, and if you get stuck, Mint has a great customer service team to get you through it. All Mint Mobile plans include unlimited nationwide talk and text, plus lightning-fast 5G and free mobile hotspot. Mint will show you how much data you use each month and recommend plans that save you money. Mint also offers a modern family plan that lets you set up a super affordable family plan with as little as 2 lines. Use my link, mintmobile.com/mobiletech, to get premium wireless starting at $15 a month. Stop paying more than you need on your wireless bill and start saving big with Mint Mobile. And Sam, I want to thank you for being my guest. Thanks again for being on the show.
Yeah.
We'll have you on again at some point. And folks, stay tuned. We'll have another show next week. So until then, cheers, everybody.
This has been the Mobile Tech Podcast with Tank Girl, proudly presented by worldpodcasts.com. You can visit us online at mobiletechpodcast.com.